Sex is the life force energy that runs through us all. Can you use sexual energy for your spiritual evolution? Or perhaps for emotional healing? Is it even possible? Clinical sexologist Dr. Martha Tar Lee will explore all these and more on Eros Evolution on Home Times Radio.
Hello, and welcome. Hello, and welcome to Eros Evolution. This is where sexuality and spirituality meets. My name is Martha. I'm a clinical sexologist based in Singapore, and I'm from Eros Coaching. That's EROS coaching.com. And I've been away for a month, and I've been in Sydney, and I was part of the Really Good Sex Festival there. I ran my own workshops the second week, took a break the third week, and on the fourth week, I attended the retreat that Really Good Sex Festival put up called Into the Wild. And so it's been really wild. I just got back to Singapore 2 days ago, and so I'm back hosting my own radio show instead of having guests coming in. And today we're talking about really real sex ed, okay? So I've just been in the Really Good Sex Festival, and we're talking about real sex ed, sex education, what it is and how to do it. And we are with Karen Rayne. She has a PhD, and she's been working in education for the past 2 decades with an expertise, of course, in sexuality education. She has a PhD in educational psychology from UT Austin, where she focused on ethics education and the choices that adolescent mothers make. She founded Unhushed in order to open conversations about sexuality in the home, and she works locally with many private schools, namely with the American Journal of Sexuality Education and the Center for Sex Education, and internationally with the UNFPA. And her books include Breaking the Hush Factor, 10 Rules for Talking with Teenagers About Sex, and she has an upcoming book called Girl, Love, Sex, Romance, and Being You. She's passionate, as you probably can tell, about comprehensive sex education to people of all ages and stages with sensitivity and a touch of humor. And you can find her at KarenRayne.com. That's RAYNE. And her website for the book is breakingthehushfactor.com. So welcome, Karen.
Hi, Martha. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you so much for saying yes. You were highly recommended by Bill, and he's been working with you at the Center for Sex Education, I believe.
Yes. Yeah, for, maybe four years now, I think.
Yeah. He highly recommended you as one of the leading people who is in this field right now. So tell us a little bit more about your work. You work with a few organizations, you said.
And what organizations I work with?
Yeah.
I work with with really different organizations, which is part of what I think is so much fun about my work. I work with religious organizations to help them craft and create and sometimes give comprehensive sexuality education in their churches. And I do that through the Unitarian Universalist Association, but also individual churches. And then I do work for, like you mentioned, the UNFPA, where I've done a variety of things, including writing curriculum for local offices. Like I was in Zimbabwe 2 years ago. And then I've also done some meetings with them in Washington, D.C., around advocacy for CSE, or comprehensive sexuality education. So I work with a really pretty wide range of orgs, which is really fun. I'm just finishing up a project with Girls Inc., which is an after-school program in the United States. And they see, 200,000 or 300,000 girls between the ages of 9 and 18 every year. And so I've helped them develop their lifespan sexuality education program. As you can see, I do a lot of different kinds of things depending on the organization and what their needs are.
That's really awesome. And of course, as today's show title is about real sex education. And this is a pretty obvious question, and I'm sure you hear this all the time. Why is it so important to have comprehensive sex education? And maybe before that, what in the first place is comprehensive sex education, and how does it compare with abstinence-based sex education?
Yeah, that's a great place to start. So comprehensive sexuality education is very much what it sounds like. It's when you talk about everything related to sexuality. So abstinence-only sex education focuses really exclusively on not having sex without a lot of information about, anything beyond saying no to sexual encounters. So it misses information around biology and anatomy and the ways that reproduction happens. They miss information about things like how to stop reproduction from happening if you are engaged sexually with someone. But then it also misses lots of things like identity and thinking about decision making as it relates to ethics and morals. And the conversations about communication within abstinence only are only about saying no rather than the broader spectrum of what communication needs to be in a romantic or sexual relationship, whether there's, sex happening or not in that context. So comprehensive sex education brings all of those things in together to this really broad program that I think has the potential, and my students have certainly told me, that it changes their perspective on their relationships with people who they care about, and in a positive way. So it enhances this broad spectrum of connection and contact. So something like flirting is an example. How do you tell when someone's flirting with you? How do you respond if you want them to flirt with you versus if you don't want them to flirt with you? Those are the kinds of things that can come under the broad umbrella of comprehensive sexuality education that don't for abstinence only.
Great. I just want to ask this right now. What are some of the sensitive topics when it comes to comprehensive sex education versus abstinence-based? Let's say in the context of Singapore, GLBTQ issues are sensitive. The moment you mention homosexuality, the public goes into an outrage and assume that talking about homosexuality is equals to promoting homosexuality, and that's a real trigger for religious groups in Singapore here. So I wonder whether that is the same in your work.
It really varies around the world, as you would expect, Martha. So, and the United States is in some ways like a small mini world. So, here there are places where it's very welcomed and expected that when you talk about sexuality, you're going to talk about it in the context of a range of sexual orientations and gender identities. And then there are places where, as you've experienced in Singapore, they are not welcoming to that kind of dialogue. So I live in Texas, where the general perspective is very conservative. And so I don't work in the public schools here in Texas because they are abstinence only, and they're not willing to bring in open dialogue about sexual orientations or gender identities. Texas is actually trying to pass a law right now where students who are transgender or gender nonconforming would be legally required to use the bathroom associated with the sex they were assigned at birth rather than their gender identity, which is, of course, such a problem and so damaging. So a lot of my work is national in scope or through the private school systems. So, I work definitely in a range of, or I experience a range of perspectives on LGBTQ issues. So that's obviously very a trigger for many people. The other topics that would be triggering in comprehensive sexuality education are conversations about consent, surprisingly, can be very conservative. And so you would think that that would not be controversial, but part of consent education in its broadest perspective is to give people the tools with which to both say yes and to say no. And so that the tools to say yes authentically through an internal decision-making process and then a communication process with their partner is very contentious.
I see. Okay. So we're going to go into break in 2 minutes. Could you just briefly answer, maybe we'll continue that conversation after the break, is what is the importance of comprehensive sex education?
Oh, briefly? I'll try. Everybody has a body, and they need to know how it works, and they need to be empowered to use it in the ways that feel good to them, and to be able to keep it from being used in ways that doesn't feel good to them, because it's their only body, and it only belongs to them.
Beautiful answer.
Yeah, I think that ideally that's what comprehensive...
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I think that ultimately that's what comprehensive sexuality education hopefully does.
Oh, okay, we have a break now. So we'll come back and until all the different layers of this when we come back. I'm with Karen Ray, and you can find her at KarenRay.com.
Your conscious lifestyle on steroids. Om Times Radio. IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
Hi, I'm Kelly Fox, host and astrologer of The Astrology Show. Each week, I'll give you access to the current transits, which are a valuable tool that provide astrological information to help unlock the potential each of us has. Understanding the stars can help steer us in the right direction to make better informed choices. So if you're wondering what's going to happen in your week ahead, be sure to tune in to The Astrology Show for guidance. Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
Every 2 minutes, an American is sexually assaulted. The majority of victims know their attacker. It could be your friend, your neighbor, or someone you met at a party. If you said no, it's rape, and it's a crime. This is Christina Ricci with Rayne. Call the National Sexual Assault Hotline today at 1-800-656-HOPE or visit Rayne.org. That's RAINN.org.
Brought to you by Rayne and this station.
You are listening to Om Times Radio. You are listening to Eros Evolution on the Om Times Radio Network, and you can share this show with your friends by going to the link omtimes.com/mobile. With this link, you can listen to the show without needing to download any app. That's really cool. And I'm talking about real sex education with Karen Ray, Dr. Karen Ray, that is. She has a PhD in educational psychology from UT Austin, and she provides sexuality education to people of all ages, writes sex ed curriculum, and trains sexuality educators in the U.S. and around the world. She believes that comprehensive sexuality education is a basic human right because knowing about the body you live in is the first step to personal autonomy. She will be discussing today's show how to make this large goal actionable both in the home and in group environments. So welcome back, Karen.
Thank you.
Just before the break, we were beginning to talk about the importance of comprehensive sex education, and you mentioned exactly what I just described in the write-up, which is that we all have a body and we need to be empowered to use it in ways that feels good to us. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
Well, the other part of it is, definitely risk avoidance, which is that when people engage in sexuality without understanding the ramifications of what might happen with different kinds of sexual acts, they put themselves at risk and potentially their partner at risk for things that they aren't prepared for. And so, I don't like to talk about sexuality or sexuality education in terms of risk avoidance, but there is definitely a piece of it there, which is, and it is also based in human rights, which is that the access to being able to make accurate decisions based on, the physiology of our bodies is really important. The misinformation that young people come to me with is just outstandingly horrifying, and I wish that none of them would have reached, the age of being a teenager or a young adult with this gross kind of misinformation about their bodies and how they work. So just in a very practical sense, comprehensive sexuality education provides a firm basis for understanding the physiology and anatomy.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. How will you know what if we're gonna be having sexual experiences? Is good to know the risk as well in the acts that we're doing. We can make accurate decisions, like what you said, and it's our body, and we need to not just feel good about it, I feel, but also feel safe, and that's different for different people how that looks.
Yeah, definitely. Have you heard of or seen the musical Spring Awakening by any chance?
No, I haven't. Tell me more about it.
Well, it was originally a play that was written in Germany in the 1880s. And then in the last, 10 years or so, it was translated into English and then set to music, modern current music style. And it was a play that ran on Broadway, and now it's toured around the United States. I don't know if it's gone much farther or not. But it's about teenagers kind of learning about themselves. And part of what's so fascinating to me about it is the timelessness of the issues. That these issues were being written about, 140 years ago, and now we're seeing teenagers with the same exact kinds of questions and problems, and that we haven't yet figured out how to educate effectively around these is really interesting. So one of the characters asks her mother how people get pregnant, and her mother refuses to answer. And then, it's a bit of a, I'm going to burst the suspense here, but she gets pregnant later in the play, or in the musical, and doesn't know how it's happened because she just knows that it happens when you get married. And she's like, but I am not married. How is it possible that I'm pregnant? And, that there's still young people who are unsure how someone gets pregnant now is just appalling.
Yeah. Now that you mentioned the show, I think I did watch it in Singapore. They did do it, and you're right that the issues that used to affect people are still happening, and these problems are still not resolved. So, what do you feel as an educator, working with you mentioned churches as well? How do you feel that we can be tackling this issue of the lack of sex education?
Yeah, in churches, I feel like there is kind of a historical pressure not to talk openly about sex, but I'm seeing that shift in more and more denominations, which is very exciting to me. And coming to this place of a deeper kind of openness, there's these two kind of spiritual perspectives on sexuality, just very broadly, I think, Martha, not to say that these are the only ones, but just very broadly, there's the idea of sexuality itself and the sexual connection and the sexual act as being something that is itself holy and spiritual. And then there's the perspective that the sexual act and sexuality broadly is more of the body and therefore not spiritual. And what perspective someone takes on this really influences their, I think, capacity to talk openly with their young people about sexuality. If they're looking at it as something that's very base, then they're not going to be willing to have a dialogue with, you know, a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old about what intercourse is and how it relates to conception and pregnancy. But the people who I know who see it as itself a spiritual act are much more open and really do want to talk with their young people about how it is this really important part of their humanity, in the same way that their spiritual beliefs might be. And so that's where I see this big difference and a rift between the churches and the communities that are open to talking about sexuality and the communities and the churches that are not willing to talk about it. So that shift from thinking about sex as being base or primal as opposed to it being this higher kind of connection, I think really helps people think like, oh, if I see it in that light and if I think about it in that context, it does become something that I want to talk to my young person about.
This is very interesting because in the world of Tantra, they do see sex as spiritual and holy, and religions are starting to see that as well.
Yeah, they are. And it's a really beautiful shift. I'm working with a lot of Episcopal communities in my local town, and it's been really fun to see them like talking within their own communities about why this should be part of their spiritual mission, to educate fully and comprehensively about sexuality.
That's great. And besides working with churches, you also work with parents and adults. So how can we as a society begin to support comprehensive sex education?
Well, so there's like the cultural or like systemic kind of support, and then there's the individual like one-on-one support that they can offer in their own context, in their own families and communities. You know, Martha, one of my goals professionally is for all people in the entire world to have someone that they can talk to about sexuality and get honest, accurate information from. And so obviously I can't be that person to everyone as much as I would love to be. And so a big part of my mission is to help other people become that person for the people in their communities. And so that's what actually my book is about, Breaking the Hush Factor, is that it's about how young people can benefit and how adults can come to them what perspective they should use. You know, I don't really talk so much about what to say in the book, but I more frame the context of how to even begin a conversation. And the first 4 of the 10 rules are about the adult themselves and preparing themselves for having an effective conversation with young people, because navigating their own nuances and being clear about themselves is really a first step before they're able to engage, I think, effectively with a young person on the young person's terms.
So this book is suitable for teenagers or adults?
It's designed for adults to read as they are considering their own perspectives and their conversations. I have the book that's coming out this summer through the Imagination Press, which is part of the American Psychological Association, is designed for older teen girls. And then I also have a book coming out with DK publishers in their London house. And that book is going to be for actually teenagers and their parents to read together, which I think is really interesting. It's called How to Help Your Kids. Yeah, I believe it's called Help Your Kids with Adolescence. And then I think that there's a subtitle, because, but I'm not sure what it is. They have a whole series about how to help.
Great. Yeah, I actually have your book, Breaking the Hush Factor, and I'm sorry to say I should have read it before this show, but I haven't. And, I've been traveling and quite chaotic and things like that. So, yeah, I know that your book was really highly recommended. And you mentioned already a little bit about the content. There are 10 rules for talking with teenagers about sex, and the first 4 rules is about, again?
The first 4 rules are really about the adult themselves and how they can kind of think through their positioning and what they need to do to bring to the conversation. So the first rule is know yourself. And so if you're thinking about engaging with someone else in a conversation around sex and sexuality, which can be so emotional and so deep and personal, being really clear about yourself first is important. The second rule is that it's not about you, which is to remind parents and adults that, when they're talking with teens, they really need to let the teenagers be the star of that show. If they want to talk about themselves or their perspectives on things, they can find other adults to do that with. And then rules 3 and 4 are also very much tied into that, which are stop talking and start listening. It's teenagers are really in this developmental place where they need to consider their own ideals and their own morals. And if they're able to do that in a place that's somewhat adult moderated, so there's an adult there mostly listening, asking some questions, maybe, giving some back and forth, dialogue around some of the deeper issues. It lets the teenager suss out their own patterns and opinions about things without it being muddied by their peers, which are far more likely to muddy their perspectives. And so then if they're able to take their own ideals into the conversations with their peers, they're much more likely to be able to hold true to those than if they were trying to figure them out among their peers.
That's good. Okay, we have a break, and we'll come back and talk with Karen again after this break.
Free your mind with Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Om Times Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment, a philanthropic organization. Their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Om Times, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Hi, this is Julie Geigel.
And I'm Susan Schuler.
And I'm Lori Walker.
And we are
the Psychic Angel Channelers
from Angel Talk Tuesday.
Tune in every week at 10 a.m. Eastern on OmTimesRadio.com.
The angels have heard your call and are here to help.
Are you ready to receive?
Bathe in the beautiful vibrational frequency to help you heal, expand, and remember your magnificence with Angel Talk Tuesday.
What's up? This is Brad and Mike from Lincoln Park for LifeBeat, the music industry fights AIDS. Listen up, times are tough and you get a lot of things thrown your way. If you're being pressured to have sex and you're not ready, then say no. If you're having sex, be smart and use protection. Respect yourself and protect yourself.
For more information, call the National AIDS Hotline at 1-800-342-AIDS or log on to www.lifebeat.org.
And welcome back to Eros Evolution. This is where sexuality and spirituality meets. We're talking about real sex education, what it is, and how to do it with Karen Rayne today. And her website is KarenRayne.com. That's R-A-Y-N-E. She has a first book that has already been published, and it's called Breaking the Hush Factor. She's working on 2 other books right now. And you can actually download her first book at hushfactor.com. So this book is actually free to download, and Karen is passionate about what she does for a living, and this book has been highly recommended. So I definitely recommend listeners to make that extra effort, download that book, read it, and begin to influence your community with more positivity, because the world really needs more comprehensive sex education. So welcome back, Karen.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
We were beginning to talk about the 10 rules that you have about talking with teenagers about sex, and you went through 3 of them so far. First one is to know yourself, to understand your own biasness and maybe sexual attitudes. The second is because this is a conversation with someone who is seeking probably support. It's really not about you. And the third, to stop talking and to start listening. So stop talking and start listening are separate rules. Got it. And do you want to cover the other rules?
Sure. I think they're pretty fun and unique. One of the things that I think is special about this book and these rules, like I mentioned, is they're really talking about how to have the conversation regardless of what your perspective is. Because what it's really encouraging is that parents see the young person's perspective, or any adults, including people who are mentoring or other kinds of interactions, are seeing the young person's perspective as what guides the dialogue and guides the need. So the second group of rules is number 5 is you get one question. And this is about not barraging the person you're talking with questions. I think that this is a mistake that lots of adults can make when they're emotional or upset. And it's the kind of thing where maybe you find a condom, or maybe you find a mention or find a reason to think that your child might be gay, or whatever it is that you find. And the questions just start coming. Where did you get that? Why do you even have it? What are you going to do with it? What were you planning? I can't believe that you blah, 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 right? It can be very overwhelming. And it really shuts down effective communication and effective dialogue. So this one question rule is about the parents or the other adult thinking through what is going to be the most effective question for that space. It gives the young person time to think through what they want to say and to potentially say some things while the adult is pondering their question. And wanting it to be an open-ended question, instead of something that's closed, that just is going to end the conversation. So that's number 5. And then number 6, do something else. This is a pretty standard recommendation, right? If you're a parent and you want to talk to your teenager, do it in the car when neither of you don't have to look at each other and you're going somewhere. Or do it while you're playing a video game. And it's a great recommendation. It's one of those standards that helps with many things. Ideally, it's something that the teenager enjoys doing so that they can have some buy-in to the process. And whatever it is that they enjoy, maybe it's baking, or maybe it's going on a hike, maybe it's computer games, or maybe it's a board game, whatever it is, something going on in the background where the people don't have to be quite so intensely involved as if they were sitting, across from each table at the dinner table. And this kind of all they have to do is just look at each other and talk. That can feel very awkward. Number 6 then is do something else. And so, I'm sorry, I already did that one. Number 7 is pleasure and pain. And this speaks to the need to talk about both. Because sexuality is, of course, capable of providing so much of both. And this is one of the places where I feel like abstinence and sexuality education goes wrong, is that they are more likely to only talk about the pain involved or the potential pain in sexual connections. And everyone knows that there's pleasure involved in sexuality. If someone comes to a teenager and starts to say, let's just talk about the bad things, the teenager is far more likely to just write them off and to dismiss them as having anything useful to say. And legitimately so. They're like, well, there's more to it than this. And so you're hiding something from me, and I don't know what it is. but I know that you're hiding information. And, you know, so Martha, in Austin, I have a business, and I do comprehensive sexuality education through my business. And I've been doing it long enough now that I'm having more and more young adults come back and talk to me about their experience, and more parents come back to me and talk to me about their children's experience. And it's just beautiful, you know, because kids leave my comprehensive sexuality education class really feeling like they have no interest in having sex, overwhelmingly. They're like, you know what, there's a lot involved in that, and I am not ready for it. It's going to be great when I am ready. As opposed to like, oh, I don't know what this is. I don't know what it involves. And so I'm just going to try it out. And that's what limiting the dialogue to either the pain or the pleasure potentially involved in sexuality does to the young person, is that it leaves them wanting more information. Whereas comprehensive sexuality education, but then also dialogue, comprehensive sexuality dialogue in the home or other environments, it doesn't leave them wanting information and needing to go out and find it. They feel like they've got it all. So then these last three, rules 8, 9, and 10, are really about encouraging the parent or the adult to keep engaging. So number 8 is be cool like a cucumber. And so that's about staying calm, you know, because it can be shocking. I have 3 kids, and you know, as they grow from being little babies into being teenagers who maybe they cuss, or maybe they talk about sex in a raunchy kind of way, you know, there's lots of ways that we can be shocked, because our perception of our children doesn't change as quickly as their self-perceptions do. You know, their self-perceptions can just change so quickly because they're evolving at such a pace. It's just remarkable. They're like toddlers, and how quickly they're growing and developing their physical bodies, but also their self-concept and their cognition and understanding of theoretical concepts. It's all just happening very, very quickly. And so it's not surprising that the adults in their lives, their perceptions of the young people don't evolve as quickly as the young people's own perceptions of themselves. So as the adults, we have to be able to stay calm and in the moment with our teenagers when they're showing us their evolution, and letting them have that space. And when we need to talk about it, or, you know, get some of it off our chest, or go be astounded, or, oh my goodness, I had no idea that my teenager thought about these things, or wanted this, or felt this, that's something to do with our adult friends and our adult support network, rather than reacting in the moment to our teenager. Number 9 is about being courageous in this process and being willing to take on whatever it is that happens. So let me tell you a little story about this. One of the reasons that I love this rule, I used to teach at the college level, and I had my students create sexuality in the media images. Like, it could be advertisements or public service announcements or music videos or whatever. They could choose their topic, but it had to be a positive representation. And so many of my students chose teenage parenting and teenage pregnancy because they thought it was interesting, but they really struggled to come up with a positive image around these things, because they all wanted to be like, oh, don't get pregnant, but that's not positive. That's a negative statement. And I had one student one year create a picture, and it was a series of public service announcements with pregnant teenagers, but the words were directed at the pregnant teenagers' parents. And they were all along the lines of, just because her parenting is starting doesn't mean that yours is ending. Which I just found really powerful, and really speaking to this need to continue to engage and to continue to be courageous as a parent around this topic. And then the last one, never surrender, is this idea of this imagery of Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill every day. in this. And it can feel a little bit like that as a parent of a teenager, that you're pushing this rock up the hill every day, and then it rolls down again. And the next day you have to have the same conversation again about whatever it is that you're talking about, because your teenager has in some small way evolved and needs it again. So those are my 10 rules.
Great. I love them.
Yeah.
I really love them. I like especially the one about pleasure and pain, because in sexuality we talk about the play with pain and pleasure, and here you're talking about the importance of talking about not just the pros but also the cons. Like it's important to say don't do this, but we don't talk about the positive messages around it. So instead of saying don't have sex, it's important also to talk about how wonderful it is with the right partner or partners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So this is great. And also the one about you get one question. Instead of being in reaction, we go into response, and we put aside the thought to think about what you mentioned, the most effective question to that conversation. So instead of telling, now actually go into coaching.
Yeah, right. Because it's not effective to tell teenagers the things that you need to support them in their own process.
Yes. So these are your 10 rules, and you mentioned that also the book is free to download. So how is the response to your book? What are some of the feedback that you've been receiving?
Oh, I've just gotten some really beautiful feedback, Martha, and it's been lovely to talk with some of the parents who have read the book and started implementing some of the practices in it, and just talk about what a change it makes in their relationship with their teenagers. It opens things up, and it might take some time to open things up because a teenager has to learn to trust that this is the new way that you're talking about sexuality, rather than just like a one-off kind of mistake. So it might take a little bit of time, but it really shifts the family dynamics in ways that parents are overwhelmingly grateful for. There's so much advice thrown at parents. Oh, here we are at the break, it seems.
Yes, we have a break, and we'll come back and talk about your book. In the meantime, people can download hashfactor.com. Download it at hashfactor.com.
Bringing you the best of the conscious minds in the world. Om Times Radio, your conscious lifestyle on steroids. The number one reason girls drop out of school in sub-Saharan Africa is lack of access to feminine hygiene products. The Pads for Schoolgirls Project, an outreach of Humanity Healing International, is changing this paradigm by setting up sewing programs at schools, teaching girls a vocational skill, while producing the reusable pads that help keep them attending classes. The girls pay it forward by making and giving pad kits to other girls in need. To learn more, visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Join me, Tammy Adams, intuitive life coach and spiritual healer, for my new show, Karma Talk. Learn how to get rid of your karma so that you can start living the life you are meant to live. I am not going to tell you what you want to hear, but what you need to hear. Join me on Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for Karma Talks on Om Time Radio.
It's on us to stop sexual assault.
To get in the way before it happens.
To get a friend home safe.
And to not blame the victim.
It's on us.
To look out for each other.
To not look the other way.
It's on us to stand up.
To step in.
To take responsibility.
It's on us, all of us,
to stop sexual assault.
Learn how and take the pledge at itsonus.org.
And we are into the last 15 minutes of today's show. This is Dr. Martha Tara Lee. I'm a clinical sexologist in Singapore and starting to travel around the world, including Australia. And you can find me at eroscoaching.com. That's EROS coaching.com. And I'm with a colleague and somebody I really respect. She's Dr. Karen Ray. And if you haven't been listening to today's show, you have missed her 10 rules to talk with teenagers about sex, and you can always listen to it by listening to our playback, basically. And so we want to talk with Karen and find out from her what other services do you have? What are some of the services that you provide, Karen?
Yeah, so of course I write curriculum. And one of the curriculums that I'm working on right now that I'm the most excited about is my own, that will be available to schools and churches and any other organizations, homeschooling groups, really whoever is interested in it, starting this summer at unhushed.net. And it's going to be so exciting, Martha. You know, usually when I write curricula, it's bound in some way, right, by the needs of the organization, which makes sense. Every organization is going to have different needs that they have. But what this curriculum does is it provides a really comprehensive, very wide-ranging, list of activities and projects that people can do with middle school students. This is for grades really 7 and 8. So like 12 to 14 maybe, that covers really everything about sexuality that's appropriate for this age group to be learning. And what I'm most excited about this is that it's going to be available exclusively for download. We might ship people copies as a special service if they would like, but most people I think will be downloading it and then printing it themselves. So it's more accessible worldwide, and then it's going to be updated. So when you have a print something, it's very hard to keep up with the changes in technology, for example. When you're talking about social media, it quickly becomes irrelevant. But this curriculum will be able to stay on point because it'll be online, and we'll be able to update lesson plans fairly regularly. And so people will buy a subscription to it, and then they can continue to access it for years afterwards for a small fee. So I think that that's going to be really fun, and that will be available at unhushed.net. There's currently a place there for you to go sign up for the mailing list, and I'm happy to email you information about it as it comes available. And then, soon after it's done, we're going to start working on the high school version for older teens, and then we'll do like a preteen version as well. And people are asking me already for a parent class to go with each of those. So it's going to become this really robust program, I think, and that's where a lot of my professional excitement is right now.
Yeah, I can definitely sense that you are really passionate about this, and it sounds fabulous. You know that people can go download and engage with you and see it being co-created, being updated and things like that.
Yeah, and then I'll go and do trainings on it. So if a school wants to implement the program, but they don't have anybody they don't have anybody on their staff who is prepared to present it, I can go and I can help them become prepared and feel ready to teach the curriculum about sexuality. So that's going to be really exciting, I think. And then in addition to that, I also do all kinds of consulting work with different organizations and with individuals. So I meet with parents one-on-one to talk about needs that they have in their family lives to help the communication around sexuality grow a little more freely. So I've had parents contact me when there's a crisis, for example, when one of their teenagers becomes pregnant, or one of their teenagers' partners becomes pregnant, or there's a positive STI result. So when the parents suddenly realize, like, oh, I need some help here, I definitely work with those parents on the phone and via Skype. And then I'll also do work around kind of more maintenance things. So for parents whose young people are just kind of coming of age and they're like, oh, I really want to make sure that this conversation is framed positively and openly in my home. We'll just hop on the phone for an hour and talk about how to do that effectively given their dynamics.
That's wonderful. Okay, so for listeners out there, you've heard what Karen is offering. She has a free downloadable book for all of you listeners, Breaking the Hush Factor, 10 Rules for Talking with Teenagers About Sex, and you can find it at hushfactor.com. And she's talking about her curriculum that is going to come out, and that is going to be available for schools and churches to purchase, and there will also be training that she'll be offering parents, and that will be available at unhushed.net. She also mentioned that she provides services, including training, and she does provide support as well to parents, and she's available face-to-face and also via Skype. She's in Austin, Texas, by the way, in case you haven't caught that in the show today. So is there anything else that you would like to add and share with listeners out there for today, Karen?
You know, I think that this is a topic that's really touchy, and if we all just pull together and feel the importance of it, I think that that's really the final message, is that, you know, it is hard, especially talking cross-generationally, to be able to do this work. And it's something that all young people need at least one adult in their lives who are able to do it. And it doesn't have to be something that you're comfortable with even. One of the things I tell parents all the time is it's okay to admit you're uncomfortable, to say to your teenager or your child, this topic is not something I'm comfortable with, but I feel like it's really important, and so I'm going to push through the discomfort. I just wanted you to know, like, claim it, own it, recognize that it's uncomfortable, and continue to move past it. And engage, you know, don't let that stop you from engaging.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all this, and thanks for coming onto today's show. And be sure to check out Karen's work at KarenRayne.com. That's RAYNE. And so I just want to take the remaining time that we have to talk a little bit about I guess my travels and my work as well. So I'm planning to go to Penang in March, and I'm calling it a Play Love. And in this retreat of a week, it's going to be one where people can engage with me. We hang out and we run mini workshops on relationships, on healing our challenges when it comes to communication. And that will be happening in Penang, Malaysia. And it's a beautiful place. It's a historical city in the first place, and of course there's lots of local food. So that's a great way to hang out with me and chill. So I have that happening in Penang, and then I'm also having another event in Bali for a week in April, and that's going to be a clothing optional, sexually explicit workshop retreat experience where people will be able to learn how to give vulval, anal, penile massage, and also techniques like blowjob, kissing, touch, tantra. So it's going to be experiential. So unlike the one in Penang, which is more focusing on relationships, the one in Bali is going to be more focusing on techniques-based, as well as, of course, the importance of consent. And I'm looking at my schedule for my speakers, and next yes, so who do I have next week? Sorry, just let me go into the system. So like Karen, I also provide coaching, and I also work with adults who have all kinds of sexuality issues. Unlike Karen, I don't do sexuality education in schools or organizations right now. What I do is I work a lot with adults who have sexuality concerns, and usually they have an issue like, for instance, premature ejaculation, erectile difficulties, low sex drive, and I work a lot with clients who have vaginismus. Basically, it's a condition that happens when the vagina shuts down, making penetration difficult or impossible. Okay, I found my guest. Okay, so next week we have Dawn Beck and Gerard Getz, and they're going to be talking about how long-term couples can keep the love going in their relationships. So I've had them on this show previously, and they teach Tantra. So they've had previous shows. They talked about how to engage in Tantra, and they talked about the differences when it comes to masculinity and femininity and what it means, and how you can engage in conscious sexuality. So I'm going to have Dawn and Gerard Getz back next week. So stay tuned to Eros Evolution. This is where sexuality and spirituality meets. And if you have any questions, suggestions, feel free to contact me, reach out to me, drop me an email, and you can find me at drmarthalee@eroscoaching.com. That's drmarthalee@eroscoaching.com. And don't forget, once again, you can find Karen at karenray.com. That's RAYNE. So this has been Martha, and thank you for tuning in. And in the meantime, keep having great sex, because sex is amazing, and we all love sex. At least I do. So goodbye, and have a good week ahead.